This is the case of Shayna Hubers, a young girl who murdered her own boyfriend. Ryan was an ambitious lawyer who unfortunately fell into a toxic and stormy relationship with a 20-year-old student named Shayna. Between breakups and reconciliations, the relationship deteriorated until he left her for a beauty queen. If you want to learn more about this tragic case, I invite you to sit back and relax because the sphere chain to Hubert starts now. Ryan was born on December 30th, 1982 in Fort Mitchell. He was the oldest of 4 children and the only boy in the family. His parents, Jay and Alyssa, divorced when he was still very young, and his mother remarried a man named Peter Carter, who Ryan and Lavera considered him as a son. Together, they had 3 daughters, Allison, Catherine, and Elizabeth. Jay and Alyssa succeeded in keeping a good relationship for the happiness and well-being of their children, and Ryan even happened to go on vacation with them a few times. His father was considered by his sisters as a knows-it-all and was able to offer their son a stable and happy education. Ryan was a kind and protective big brother. He grew up in a well-known, influential family. His father worked for the former governor of Kentucky and for U.S. Senator Jim Byrne, where he lived with his mother, stepfather, and 3 half-sisters. However, while he was in high school, the family moved to the Philippines for professional reasons, where Ryan studied at the International School of Manila. Then, the family left to live in Switzerland, where he obtained the equivalent of the baccalaureate at the International School of Geneva. Ryan found it difficult to be separated from his father during this time because he missed him so much. He was overjoyed when his family returned to the United States from Switzerland. When he returned, he spent a lot of time with his father and became very close to him. His father encouraged him and even assisted him in maintaining his apartment and washing his clothes so that he could devote more time to his studies. Most of the women considered Ryan as the perfect partner. He was very handsome, ambitious, and successful. Moreover, he was a cultivated and intelligent young man. When he arrived in a room, his friends said that he aroused the interest of all the women. He was very charismatic and loved debating, discussing politics, and current affairs. He also had a passion for weapons, which he collected. Ryan went to the University of Indiana after high school to study history, geography, and political science. He then continued his education by enrolling in law school at Northern Kentucky University. He worked as an assistant in a law firm in Cincinnati after graduating from law school. In 2009, at the age of 26, he met Lorraine at a local bar. Lorraine was a law student at the same university that Ryan graduated from. It was love at first sight, and they fell in love with each other very quickly. They settled in a pretty little apartment and adopted 2 puppies. However, while most of their friends saw them already married, unfortunately, Lorraine and Ryan separated 2 years later in 2011. They explained their separation to their loved ones by saying that they each worked a lot on their own to launch their careers as lawyers and to finish their studies. Shortly after the breakup, Ryan's cousin Carissa was telling him about a 19-year-old girl, Shayna Hubert, who she thinks would be perfect for him. She attended the University of Kentucky and lived in the same apartment complex as Carissa. Ryan and Shayna's toxic relationship deteriorated even further between April and July 2012, when Ryan decided to leave her permanently. Shayna, who had the keys to Ryan's apartment, disagreed and showed up unannounced and refused to leave. Ryan had wanted to change the lock but had never gotten around to it. One day, when Shayna refused yet again to leave the apartment, Ryan grabbed her bag and threw it in the hallway, then grabbed Shayna and literally threw her out of the house. The neighbors were accustomed to these incessant disputes. Another time, Ryan was forced to spend the night with Shayna's father because she still refused to leave. In August 2012, her father saw Shayna arriving at his apartment after midnight, upset because she had come to his house again, refusing to leave. Ryan confided in his father and told him that he wanted to leave Shayna, but that she didn't accept it and wouldn't leave him alone. Ryan was completely destitute that whole night, and his father was receiving incessant beeps of text messages from his son. A few days later, Jay, Ryan's father, met with Shayna in an attempt to tell her that his son no longer wants her and that it would be better for everyone if she moves on. However, Shayna did not accept this and nothing changed after the meeting. Ryan also confided in his cousin, telling her that he could not leave Shayna because she was crazy and he was afraid of hurting her. He did not know how to act with her and even considered seeking a restraining order. Shayna also complained about Ryan's behavior, saying that he was verbally and emotionally abusive. She had confided in one of Ryan's neighbors, telling her that Ryan was mean and telling her that she was not beautiful, too fat, and needed to get her breasts redone. Since April 2012, Ryan and Shayna officially admitted they are no longer together, but Shayna continued to harass him and did not accept the breakup. In September 2012, they decided, due to Shayna's insistence, to give it another chance and got back together. By fall 2012, Shayna was 21 and Ryan was 29. Ryan was in conflict with a former partner and the situation was stressing and upsetting him enormously. His situation with Shayna was making matters worse, and their relationship was becoming more and more conflicted. I'll tell you an anecdote to illustrate how toxic the relationship was. On October 1st, 2012, Ryan invited Shayna to go shooting at the shooting range. On this particular occasion, Shayna sent a message to one of his friends joking, "I went to the shooting range with Ryan tonight and I felt like turning around to shoot him and make it look like an accident." On his side, Ryan was not doing very well. He was totally under pressure and on edge because of his difficulties with his former partner. On October 4th, he texted a friend saying, "There is nothing I want more than to burn this earth and reduce this entire town to ashes." They were both taking antidepressants as well as other powerful stimulants that are illegal in France. Ryan was also becoming increasingly addicted to cocaine and marijuana. Professionally, he was increasingly considering ending this relationship permanently. Ryan had been looking at other women on social media for a few weeks. Meanwhile, Shayna was desperately clinging to him, sending him 50 to 100 messages per day if he didn't answer his phone. If she couldn't reach him by phone because his secretary was blocking calls, she would go to his office and refuse to leave until she saw him. Her father was relieved because he knew Ryan and Shayna's relationship was toxic, but he respected the decision his son had made a few weeks ago. Ryan believed he was capable of managing his own romantic relationships because he was an adult and responsible. After breaking up with Shayna, Ryan and Shayna both went to Ryan's apartment to spend the night, and that's when he announced the breakup. Shayna did not take the news well, and after the reproaches, crying, and tears, she lay down on the couch in the living room and went to bed in Ryan's room. That night, while Ryan was sleeping in his room in his mother's house, Shayna traveled 130 kilometers in the middle of the night to go to Ryan's apartment in order to spend the night with him. The next day, when Ryan woke up, he was surprised to find Shayna and her mother in his living room. Shayna told him that she was not feeling well, that she had chest pain, and asked him to take her to the emergency room. Ryan instantly refused and told her to go with her mother, as he had to work a long day and would be out of the apartment all day. Shayna texted him to keep him informed of his condition and told him that she had seen a specialist and even gave him the name of the drugs that she had been prescribed. Ryan replied and advised her to rest and take care of herself, but for him the relationship no longer represented anything, and he had already been in contact for a few days with Audrey Revolt on Facebook. Audrey, known as Miss Ohio 2012, was the one who made the first contact, and they had been discussing for several days. They had a strong connection and arranged to meet that same evening at 9:30 p.m. So, on the day after the final separation between Ryan and Shayna, Ryan and Audrey were both very excited to meet. Shayna has always denied knowing about the appointment, but this is highly unlikely given that she had access to Ryan's Facebook account and had been closely monitoring it. She had met Audrey through social media and had exchanged a few messages with her. The analysis of Shayna's computer will confirm that she had made extensive research on Miss Ohio 2012. Ryan, as mentioned, was very excited about his date with the beautiful Audrey and had told his work colleagues about it. His secretary, already concerned about Shayna's behavior, asked him if everything was under control with Shayna. Ryan told her that he had ended things with Shayna and that everything was under control, but contrary to what he made Ryan think, Shayna did not go to the that day. She spent the day shopping with her mother, and during that day she had searched for information on high blood pressure and heart disease in order to give more weight to her lie. She had looked up medication for left ventricular hypertrophy on the internet and had given Ryan the names of the drugs she had allegedly been prescribed. That night, after work, Ryan returned home excited about the idea of his date with the beautiful Audrey. He had many interests and went to work every day armed. When he arrived at his apartment, he used to put his gun on the table, and that's exactly what he did that day before getting ready for his appointment. Shayna Hubert, on the other hand, broke into his apartment around 8:30 p.m. and at 8:54 p.m., a young woman called 911 in Naples to say she had shot and killed her boyfriend in self-defense. The police arrived on the scene a few minutes later and discovered the man lying under the table with multiple bullet holes. The self-defense version of events was initially difficult to accept because there was no evidence of a struggle in the apartment. The woman told the 911 operator that the man had attacked her and thrown her on the couch and against a shelf, but nothing had been broken or overturned in the apartment. In fact, the shelf mentioned by the woman was completely intact and no objects had been knocked over. The paramedics wanted to examine the woman, but she refused, saying everything was fine and she didn't need any help. Shayna was taken to the police station and questioned by officers. She started crying when they asked if she wanted anything. When she realized she was being filmed, she stopped crying and requested a lawyer. While waiting for the lawyer, the police were unable to question her, but she began to speak on her own, discussing the man who had been killed in their relationship. She was wiretapped for 3 hours, and the cops were intrigued by her behavior. After being arrested and charged with the murder of Ryan, Shayna was incarcerated and a bond of $5 million was requested. Not having enough money to pay it, she remained in prison awaiting her trial. In January 2013, she pleaded not guilty. 2 years later, on April 13, 2015, her trial opened. The defense's argument remained the same. She had acted in self-defense because Ryan was a violent person. The defense presented messages sent by Ryan to his friends in which he said that he wanted to burn all life and argued that Ryan was under strong professional pressures and was using various drugs, including cocaine, marijuana, antidepressants, and stimulants, which could have caused him to attack Shayna. According to the defense, Shayna and Ryan had a fight that night when Ryan caught Shayna trying to leave the apartment. He threw her against the couch, a shelf, and the TV, and then picked her up and put her on the table. She managed to steal his gun and shot him 7 times, saving herself in self-defense. However, the prosecution argued that there were no signs of a struggle in the apartment and that the shelf was intact, which made it hard to believe the self-defense argument. They also argued that Shayna may have killed Ryan because he had an appointment that day and asked her to leave when she unexpectedly arrived at his apartment. Based on the prosecution's evidence, when Ryan saw Shayna, he asked her to leave and probably told her that he had an appointment. Not able to cope with the rejection, the prosecution argued that Shayna took the gun from the table and shot Ryan in the head, causing him to fall onto a chair with his head on the table. Ryan's neighbors testified that they heard a woman crying on the terrace around 8:15 p.m. and then heard gunshots 15 minutes later. According to the prosecution, if Shayna had acted in self-defense after the first shot, which hit Ryan in the head, she would not have fired 5 more times. The medical examiner determined that the shots were fired from different angles, and that after the second shot, Ryan was lying on the ground and no longer posed a threat to Shayna. To explain why she fired several shots, Shayna claimed that the first shot had disfigured Ryan and he was shaking, so she preferred to finish him to prevent him from suffering. The police discovered that before calling 911, Shayna had called her mother, who was hysterical, terrified, and in shock. She advised Shayna to call the police and tell everything, which Shayna did 15 minutes later. During the trial, a co-detainee who shared a cell with Shayna testified that Shayna had bragged about killing Ryan. She initially claimed that she was going to plead insanity, but later clarified that she was too smart to plead insanity and was going to plead the battered woman syndrome instead. On April 23, 2015, after 5 hours of deliberation, Shayna was found guilty of murdering Ryan and was sentenced to 40 years in prison. The judge even told her that he did not think that she was a victim of domestic violence. If she had been convicted of domestic violence, she would have been eligible for parole after 8 years, but since she was not, she would not be eligible for parole until after 20 years. On August 25, 2016, 1 year after her conviction, Shayna obtained an appeal for the annulment of her trial because one of the members of the jury had been convicted of a crime in the past and, according to the law, convicted criminals cannot be part of a jury. However, this member had only been sentenced for non-payment of alimony and was still in detention. The retrial began on June 7, 2018, and during this trial, Shayna testified about the abuse that Ryan had inflicted on her. She also testified about the accusations concerning her weight and the surgery. The victim was initially diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, but a second expert examined her and determined she was suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome. The victim was fully aware of what she was doing during the 911 call and her 3-hour statement to the police, according to the second expert, who spoke with her for 15 hours. The victim was able to sense Ryan's pain during the altercation and decided to end his life, demonstrating that she was fully aware of her actions until Ryan's death. Ryan's family, including his father and sisters, testified about their grief at the loss of their son and brother. Ryan's sister, Catherine, even testified with a teddy bear made from one of Ryan's shirts, which contained recorded messages from Catherine. On August 29, 2010, Shayna made a smoking noise after 5 hours of deliberation and was found guilty of murder for a second time, sentenced to 40 years in prison. In January 2019, Shayna filed for divorce from Richard McBee, a transgender inmate who is currently still incarcerated and will be eligible for parole in 2032 when she will be 40 years old. Audrey Revolt has continued to live in Colorado. It is difficult to imagine what might have happened that night if Ryan and Audrey had decided to meet at Ryan's apartment instead. Ryan's father is still devastated by the loss of his only child and took care of Ryan's little dog after his death. In an interview, he said he thought his son's soul was present in the dog, and he wears his son's watch every day and sometimes dresses in his shirts and shoes. It is hoped that he will be able to eventually mourn and move on. Ryan was an attractive and handsome young man with a certain level of wealth and influence. He was much sought after by women, and when he discovered Shayna's profile on Facebook, he was immediately seduced by her appearance. Shayna was younger than him, and although she had not come from a wealthy family like Ryan, she had achieved success through her hard work. When Shayna first met Ryan, he must have seemed like the ideal Prince Charming. He had everything going for him, but the foundations of their relationship were not clearly established from the start. Shayna desired a true love story and a fairy tale, but Ryan was fresh out of a nearly 2-year relationship and was unwilling to commit or give exclusivity. He wanted to have a good time at university and was very busy with his work, which he wanted to do well in, just like his grandfather, father-in-law, and uncle. Growing up with several strong male role models undoubtedly influenced him in this direction. Shayna was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder during the second trial. People with this disorder have an extreme or exaggerated fear of losing contact with the people in their lives, and they are easily rejected or abandoned by others, which can lead to conflicts in their social relationships. They have a strong need for others to reassure them of their presence and the significance of their relationship. This is why, in my opinion, Shayna asked Ryan's friends if his ex-girlfriend Lauren was more attractive than her. Borderline personality disorder has an impact on how people think, act, and feel. It interferes with their emotions, behaviors, self-image, identity, and interpersonal relationships. Shayna's relationships were always difficult, and her friends claimed that she overreacted when breaking up or rejecting someone. Borderline personality disorder symptoms typically appear in adolescence or early adulthood. People with this disorder frequently have a negative self-image and devalue themselves because they feel misunderstood. Ryan may have been narcissistic and placed a high value on appearing a certain way. We don't know what happened exactly when he rejected or devalued Shayna by telling her she was too fat and needed to be redone. These kinds of remarks, in my opinion, would not have helped matters and would have influenced Shayna's perception of herself, especially given her sensitivity to negative criticism. People with this disorder frequently struggle with loneliness and emotional instability. They have difficulty regulating their emotions and controlling their anger, which may appear inappropriate and excessive to others. Shayna was desperate to avoid abandonment and needed a man to feel whole. She felt she lacked a proper identity outside of the relationship and that it was the center of her entire universe. Shayna was fighting to save her relationship as if it were her life. During their 18-month relationship, she was completely obsessed with Ryan, sending him 50,000 texts and over 1,000 photos. However, an analysis of their conversations revealed a 50-to-1 ratio, implying that while Shayna sent him 50 messages, he only responded with 1. His messages were frequently rejected, telling her not to send him messages because he didn't read or respond to them. People suffering from borderline or borderline personality disorder frequently experience a persistent sense of inner emptiness. According to a study of over 5,000 people with this disorder are more likely to have experienced a significant childhood trauma. Shayna claimed to have experienced several sexual traumas in her life during the 37 hours she spent with the psychiatric expert for her evaluation. She claimed she was sexually assaulted by a cousin of her mother when she was 5 years old and again in the showers after a football game when she was 16. Things became complicated for her after this incident. She claimed that she began drinking excessively, became reckless and impulsive, and was arrested for drunkenness and shoplifting while still a minor. She had numerous sexual encounters and was looking for sexual promiscuity. She also claimed Ryan coerced her into having sex with other women. No one, however, confirmed or denied these claims. Shayna also stated that her relationship with her father was unhealthy, claiming that he frequently made rude and inappropriate comments about her appearance and would watch women on TV while touching himself. Shayna's parents have denied all of this, so it is a case of one person's word against another. When Ryan's parents found out that he had a date with Audrey that evening, Shayna went to his apartment to try to impose herself and disrupt the date. It is possible that Ryan became angry when he found out that she was at his house and may have said something hurtful to get her to leave or told her that he was going on the date with Audrey regardless. The neighbors did not hear any arguments or crying, so the conversation may have been harsh and humiliating for Shayna, but Ryan was not physically violent or threatening. It's possible that the mere presence of Shayna at Ryan's house that evening was enough for Ryan to cancel his date with Audrey. She may have hoped that they would choose to stay with her and must have imagined a scenario in which this would occur, clinging to it with all her might. Shayna may have felt helpless when Ryan refused to comply and her rage erupted. She grabbed a gun from the table and shot Ryan in the head once, then fired 5 more times in a rage while he was critically injured. According to one source, Shayna fired 6 times at Ryan from 3 different angles, walking around him and shooting him while he was collapsed. This demonstrates an irresistible urge to empty the magazine and do even more harm. In my opinion, firing 6 times at someone while they are defending themselves demonstrates an irrepressible anger or rage, similar to when Thomas Griffin killed his ex-girlfriend Claire Wilson in front of their daughter. I believe Shayna pretended to be insane the first time, which is why she acted strangely during the trial. In retrospect, and after consulting with her attorneys, they most likely decided to play the domestic violence and self-defense card. I don't believe they were the victims of domestic violence. That's what Shayna said, I believe, in an attempt to reduce her responsibility and sentence. I believe she was suffering from a borderline personality disorder. Her parents have denied the allegations of abuse, but I believe these issues do not arise out of nowhere. In my opinion, Ryan's behavior and way of being only reinforced Shayna's pathology by showing interest in her when it suited him and then dropping her when she became too intrusive. He didn't try to fix things, and in my opinion, he should have ended things sooner rather than later, especially if they didn't want a serious relationship. Shayna had always desired a reciprocal and exclusive love story, and when Ryan rejected her, she paid the price with her life. It's tragic that his untimely and brutal death was so difficult for his family and loved ones to bear, and their anguish must have been immense. Do you think Shayna acted in self-defense, as she claims? How could Ryan have protected himself if he found her dangerous? Those are some questions that I'll leave you to think on your own. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to follow for more crime stories.